Okay, hello. I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting for the City of Indio for Wednesday, April 24, 2024, to order at 6:01 p.m. If we could please have roll call.
Commissioner Rodriguez Ceja,
Present.
Commissioner Isiano,
Present.
Commissioner Fajardo,
Present.
Vice Chairperson Lopez,
Present.
Chairperson Franz,
Present. And if we could move to the Pledge of Allegiance, and if Commissioner Fajardo would please lead us. Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to item number 3, public comment for items not on the agenda. Do we have any requests to speak?
there are none.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, we'll go ahead and close the public comment, and we'll move on to the minutes of April 10th. Do I have any comments or a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes for April 10th.
I'll second the motion. Okay, we have a first and a second. A roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Rodriguez Ceja,
Abstain.
I believe you were here for that, for April 10th?
Oh, I might have looked at the wrong minutes then. Let me pull them up then. Do you have a copy?
No, you're making me think.
I know. I'm worried now.
It was the last meeting.
There was unanimous attendance on April 10th.
There was, okay, great. I'm good, somebody knows.
Okay. Then yes.
Commissioner Isiano,
Yes.
Commissioner
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Lopez,
Yes.
Chairperson Franz,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. And we're going to open the public hearing for item number 5.1, request for conditional approval of planning review. Do you have a staff report?
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Kevin Snyder, Director of Community Development. This particular item is a planning review application request for the construction of a 70-foot high freeway pylon sign at the Palms Shopping Center. The staff report was issued, but as I notified in an email to the Planning Commission earlier today, the applicant has requested a continuance to a date and time certain of May 22nd, beginning at 6 p.m. He would like to update the submittal with additional design details and also work with staff on a couple of questions and issues that, in the staff report that he would like to get clarification on. So staff is recommending the continuance. Because this was an advertised public hearing, it is appropriate and legally necessary to allow any members of the public to provide comments, whether oral or written. However, if you decide to continue it, then the continuance would be based on a motion action taken by the commission, and the public hearing will remain open until that date and time certain. Happy to answer any questions if the commission has any, but again, staff is recommending the continuance to a date and time certain of May 22nd, 6 p.m.
Just to confirm, it was May 22nd or May 26th?
Excuse me, May 22nd.
Okay, 22nd. Okay, so we should open the public hearing first and then make the motion.
Correct.
So I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on this item today?
There are no comments.
Great. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to move our planning review for case DR 22080505 to time certain of May 22nd.
At 6 p.m., so time and date certain.
6 p.m. May 22nd, date certain.
Thank you.
Second.
We can have roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Rodriguez Ceja,
Yes.
Commissioner Isiano,
Yes.
Commissioner Fajardo,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Lopez,
Yes.
Chairperson Franz,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 6, action items. There are none, and so we'll go ahead and move on to study session item 7.1. It's the continued discussion of potential regulatory policy options for self-storage, mini storage facilities.
Great. Again, Kevin Snyder, Director of Community Development. So this evening, the fun continues, so to speak. At your last meeting on April 10th, the Commission, in a study session format, discussed potential regulatory options. Staff presented 7 different regulatory options for the Commission. At the conclusion of that discussion, you gave consensus direction on what we'll call a hybrid policy approach. That consisted of policy alternative number 4, which was a limitation on the total number of facilities within the city. Policy alternative plus policy alternative 6, which was locational limitations for facilities, plus policy alternative number 2, which were enhanced design standards. So at the end of that meeting, we discussed that staff would come back with a refinement, more detail on a potential approach on this hybrid concept. And so in the memorandum that was issued as part of the agenda, we have discussed the potential approach on this. I can summarize, if you would like, the approach, and then certainly open up for further discussion and questions. In terms of the limitation on the number of facilities, so staff looked at various options. As we had mentioned before, we with the cannabis facilities, we had done it on a per capita basis. That proved a little bit challenging because at the end of the day, the difference between the high and the low range was de minimis. It was less than 1,000 people when we did the math. So that didn't seem overly appropriate to this situation. We also looked at the industry standard, which is on a basis of per square foot basis, which is a certain square footage ranging anywhere from 5 to 10 feet per person in a community, plus other factors. Well, the challenge with that is that makes a lot of sense probably from the market perspective, because you're analyzing the overall competitiveness of the market. It's more challenging to take that approach and apply it in a regulatory context, because those factors, both the square footage plus the other factors, which include the number of facilities, the rental structures, and the overall, and then the surrounding area, that is not regulatory, that's market-based. So staff felt that that was a particularly challenging way to apply regulations that would ultimately be legally defensible and would be more challenging to implement, because we would literally have to try to apply a market-based approach to a regulatory-based standard each time we looked at one of these. So we looked at a third option. The third option was to look at where we are today, which is 20 facilities that have either been approved, constructed, or in operation in the city, and to extrapolate that out to the build-out population of the city, which per the General Plan 2040 is planned for 121,000 people. And that averages out to 4,599 persons per that 20 facilities. So if you look at where our population is today and where our population is supposed to be, we're looking at roughly slightly under 30,000 people that we should see by 2040 in the city. And if you extrapolate that further out, that is approximately 6 more facilities that, based on this 4,599 persons, you could expect to see. If you may remember when we were talking on April 10th, we were throwing out hypothetical numbers, 25, 26, 27. Well, it just happened that this coincided with that. It's a measurable number. It's factually based. It's tied back to the general plan in terms of planned population growth of the city. It's also tied back to a measurable based on the growth of these facilities, tied back to the number of facilities we currently have in the city and our population. So staff felt that that was the better way of looking at it, and felt that that would be an approach where if, for example, the commission in its recommendation to City Council said, Council, we believe this is the appropriate method, theoretically, you would end up with 26 facilities in the city when the city's build-out population of 121,000 people is reached. Whether that happens immediately or whether that happens by 2040, that's a policy, kind of a policy subtext to this conversation. Because you as a commission could say, we'll let the market decide. If you want to build 6 more facilities in the next 2 years, if you agree to that measurement, go forward and allow that to happen. You could say we want a more measured pace and recommend to council that those 6 additional facilities, we only allow 1 per year or some other measurable. So there's some options for the commission to consider if you first accept this measurement approach and that ultimate build out. And then another potential policy question for you, just on this policy alternative we're talking about right now, is what happens when you reach that 26? And let's say that a certain facility closes. So you went from, you were at your 26, now you're at 25. Do we allow it to go back up to 26? Or do we say that, no, in a kind of an amortization model, when you lose one, then the number goes down. And if you lose a number, let's give me another one, that number goes down again. So that's another policy question that staff is presenting to you this evening for discussion. So I'm going to stop there because I just threw a lot of information out at you, and I'm sure you might have some questions or want to seek clarification before we jump into the other policy alternatives of this hybrid concept. So happy to answer any questions. This is a study session model, so it's a little bit more informal and intended to just have a back and forth. Obviously, Jennifer's here, our assistant city attorney, so she can help guide on any legal questions or any of her practical experience as well. So any questions we can answer?
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, just real quick, just to confirm, Kevin, and thank you, by the way, and the staff. So it's $4,599 per person based on this projected growth model that we would potentially reach the 121.
So our general plan is
date.
2040.
Correct.
So if our population growth patterns held, so to speak, we would see 121,000 people within the city of Indio city limits by 2040.
Correct. Perfect. And then the second option that you were indicating, sort of the vis-a-vis the amortization model, essentially that would not necessarily mean that we would simply open it up to add the 26th facility simply because the 26th facility closed down. Correct?
For example, that would be a policy consideration for the commission to consider in your recommendation to council. It would be an amortization approach, which basically would say that over time, if facilities closed for whatever reason, whether they were old, whether they were damaged, whether they were, the market changed and there was too many facilities and their market needed to right itself. So if we had 26 and suddenly we saw 2 close, then one policy option is to say, we don't go back to 26. We basically, that's the max number, and as things happen to these facilities over time, that number may go down practically.
Thank you.
Were we able to research and get any sort of occupancy rate, so to speak, of, how full some of these
No,
are? That's kind of their own private.
It is. Nico Gutron is sitting behind me, and he did everything. He called and begged, and they won't give away that information. It's proprietary and it's market competition. Yeah. What we do know anecdotally, just from talking to folks, is that current occupancy rates in the city are high. Which is why we see the facilities coming to the city. They believe that there's enough demand to support additional facilities, but actual rates we weren't able to get.
I'm going to piggyback off of Commissioner's question. Going back to what we talked about on April 10th, Kevin, is there a possibility to have folks actually provide a market research study to try to attempt to get to?
Well, we did provide you one, the Rancon
Correct.
study, and other parties, when we reached out, no other parties were willing to share that. Again, it's proprietary information. Dan, who spoke at the previous meeting with the Rancon group, was generous to share that information with us, but we had to ask, we couldn't require. But I think it gives you kind of good insight into how they look at the market forces. And I think, Dan can't speak for others. He did share at that time that this is fairly common studies, so I think we at least get a sense of how they look at things.
Okay, then I'll go next. So I do like this idea of having it tied to our population, so that if we ever get to 200,000 people or some very big number, then there's more demand, we need more, right? So I like that concept, and it's something that's easy to measure, right? And be able to say, this is why we're doing what we're doing. But when I, just did a little research online, nothing scientific, most cities that I could find reported that it was 1 per every 10,000 residents is what it was the most common number that I kept seeing. Somewhere more, somewhere less.
Yeah.
So if that's the number, we are already way over what, maybe a city of our size should have, right? And we're also way over what any other city in the Coachella Valley has. There's no one even close to us. So I honestly feel that if we take this approach of a number, I think it needs to be significantly higher than 4,500 residents, because I think we need to slow it down, and then as we grow, then open it back up. That's where I think I'm concerned, is I think that number is low.
It's a good point, and while I won't say our research was exhaustive, it's literally all over the place, is I think the best way. This fits into the category, if less science, more art, so to speak, in terms of how cities approach this, and I think it really comes down to the individual needs, perspectives, and wants of communities. Some communities want these facilities. There's a high demand, a high need. Other communities are more measured. Some communities have said no more. The example we gave the last time of one community in Rhode Island, Providence, that said, we're done. So that number, I think at the end of the day, whatever number the commission ultimately wants to recommend, it needs to be measurable. We said that the last time. This was a way to tie it back to the current inventory and the population that supported that level of facilities, versus and tie that to growth and say that there's a little bit more bandwidth before you reach that top. But the commission could say, to the chair's point, we talked about it last time. We said you could do a prohibition. One caveat to say, we feel like we do have enough, and we think we should have a period of not allowing it, and I'm just going to make years up, for 3 years, and revisit it at the end of the 3 years and see what is going on in the marketplace, the community, perhaps assess the community through a community survey, perspectives through a community survey at that time. So even though you settled on this at the last meeting, if the consensus of the commission today, remember we're study sessions, so no decisions are made, that's the next meeting, you could do that. So it really comes back to what you think. The 1 per 10,000, I saw that number a couple times, but I could never figure out where they came up with that, because I tried a couple of math things just with the populations, and it literally seemed like they chose it as a more of a subjective number than an objective, at least based on my research, which was not exhaustive.
Well, and to be honest, the other concern is the limited land that we have, right, that these units take. And you talk about how many we have now, but how many of these are new? It isn't like we've been supporting 20 of these units for the last 20 years. We have it. I mean, how many are brand new? 10?
Seven. So
Seven.
we have 7 out of that 20, 13 are existing, 7 would be new.
That's significant.
And I'm jumping ahead a little bit to the point you raised, Chair. When we got to the enhanced design standards, we recommended looking at Scottsdale model, which is 2-story only with no outdoor storage. The benefit of that is it takes up less land area. So if you wanted to, say, for example, allow the 6, new ones coming down the road later on, you could, if the council's agreed with you, we could have regulations that say they have to be 2-story, no outdoor storage, which is going to significantly decrease the amount of land area that these facilities occupy, if to do that. That model was interesting for staff because it was really purposeful on saying these facilities need to look better, they need to take up less land area, and there needs to be no outdoor storage. So Scottsdale was very purposeful. Another desert community was very purposeful in using design as a way to control the overall impact as well.
Kevin, if I may, did that Scottsdale model, forgive me for not remembering, did they also have locational limits in their?
They don't have locational limits, but in a way they do, because these design standards kind of are self-limiting. In terms of, if someone has a 10-acre piece of property, it probably doesn't make much sense
Correct.
based on their design standards. If they have a 2-acre piece of property, it probably makes more sense.
So when you couple that along with the potential, limit, right, with the enhanced design and locational limits, we could potentially consider looking at that versus prohibition.
Right, so we started with the number,
Correct.
and then the next proposal was looking, and staff is recommending a geographic separation, a physical separation. We looked at a spacing, if you will, between them. And then you look at the design standards. So when you take all these potential limitations, they start to kind of, in essence, reduce the opportunities for just spreading. To the chair's point, we have we have 7, we could get 6 more, but then the market's going to have to decide, is it worth it? With these limitations the city has placed, is it worth it? Do we still get the market rents that we see as valuable enough to warrant the level of investment? Because if you look at the example from Scottsdale, these look more like office buildings, less like storage buildings. There's a high level of detailed design. They're 2-story. It's much, I'm not going to say that they aren't still storage facilities, but it's much higher design enhancement. At a certain point, the pro forma of whether or not that level of investment warrants the rental rates you're going to get, that's going to be a market consideration. So you as a commission know this is the direction you gave last week or 2 weeks ago. You could decide if you wanted to go a different route. We could go back and discuss the other alternatives again. If the commission felt that the chair's idea of, I still feel like we got enough, I still feel like we need to take a pause. The idea I threw out at you of taking a pause for a specified period of time with a commitment to revisit at the end of that time is another regulatory option.
And I guess more of a background, I guess, on how do we go about saying conditional use, like when we're doing drive-throughs or certain types of developments? Like with what you're suggesting now, is that something that could also be weaved into it as a way of creating the conditions for either council or the planning commission to evaluate whether that type of development is correct for this particular site when things...
Absolutely. Yeah, so right now, these facilities are allowed in our light industrial and heavy industrial zoning districts. When you develop the Unified Development Code, you identified that they were permitted land uses, which means they still have to go through design review, but they don't have to go through a conditional use permit process. So they're still going through a public hearing process, but this conditional use permit component of that is not required. You could, to the commissioner's question, you could, as part of your recommendation to council, say, we need to change that permitted status, conditional use permit, and have a higher level of review. So the short answer is yes.
Which then I think would get at our concern about making sure that we're also still meeting a demand as our city continues to grow, but we are making decisions at a pace that both goes along with what the market is putting, but also how we're seeing the needs of our city.
The only caution that, and I'm sure the Assistant Secretary may have, is you have to have findings of fact for denial for a conditional use permit consideration, which can be challenging if they appear to meet the overall code requirements. You could develop specific decision-making criteria, or we can develop for your consideration, specific decision-making criteria for a conditional use permit that would be above and beyond what the existing criteria already are for this specific land use. So that's another option. But and again, Jennifer may want to jump in. It's always one of those be careful what you ask for kind of situations. I don't know if you want to add.
Specifically with respect to the permitted use versus CUP, it is a higher level, obviously, of scrutiny. You have a public hearing before the body, but you're right. I mean, just like findings would have to be made, the decisions what the courts don't like are decisions based on arbitrary and capricious standards. We get that all the time. Is it arbitrary? Is it capricious? And what that means is Is it so kind of out of this world that we cannot make certain findings? So findings obviously are required to be made. That's why you see them in all of your staff reports. They're needed. That's all I have to say on that point. If the commission does want any other point of view in terms of buffering or spacing, there's a whole bunch of fun legalities in that. The good news is that we still, as a city, have what's called plenary land use authority, which means that we still have a good amount of discretion in our land use. The state has taken away other forms of discretion lately, but we still have at least local discretion in our land use and planning.
And Jennifer actually did a good transition, because to go back to the physical spacing that I had mentioned just a few minutes ago. So in your memo, we proposed to use some different spacing alternatives. The first is basically a half-mile spacing. So from an existing facility to a new facility has to be a half mile, and if you got another facility, has to be a half mile away. So this idea of physical spacing based on lineal feet, so 2,640 lineal feet, which is half a mile. The other option would be to, and these can be combined or separate. The other option would be to have a physical distance separation from a street that has a functional classification of collector or higher, so keeping them away from major streets, which can reduce visibility, can reduce any potential traffic impacts associated with them. And the functional classification is based on the general plan. So in our general plan, we have a functional classification street map that says for the streets in the city, there are certain streets that are residential, there are certain streets that are collector, and there are certain streets that are arterial. So we have another way to tie back to a verified, adopted document of the city, which is that functional street classification. The third component, or third idea under this policy alternative number 6, is you could take those two together. You could take the half mile plus the 1,000 feet from a collector or grader, and when someone's citing, when they come in, we would apply a lens of saying, okay, are you a half mile from a facility? And are you 1,000 feet from a collector? And if you are, and we do allow them, then they get to pass go. If they're not, then that site's not the right site for them. So that is another way to look at it. And maybe just to close out, as I mentioned before, the policy alternative 2, which is enhanced design standards. So our friends in Scottsdale, and this is in your packet, they put together a very detailed set of design guidelines. And so they did the work for us in many ways. I think in looking, I found this to be the most comprehensive in a similar climatic environment with similar land use topography considerations. So from staff perspective, this seemed to be a good model. Now, we may want to tweak it ultimately to make it more Indio, but it's a good foundation, we thought, from staff perspective. So, to go backwards, to go forwards, we took your direction last time. We did put together the components of this hybrid approach. If the commission, and if you would like to revisit some of the other ones, including the prohibition, we can certainly do that this evening. This was our attempt. We did not specifically go into this conditional use permit versus permitted status, which certainly can be a component of any recommendation you make to the council if you so choose. You could also, as part of that prohibition, let's come back in 3 years, you could change that to an X, which is not permitted, if that was the consensus of the commission. So happy to answer more questions and have more conversation at your leisure.
So one question on the Scottsdale. Do you guys know how many they have, and what's their population?
So Scottsdale is about 150,000 people, so they're
Okay.
bigger. I don't have a count. I wasn't able to figure that out. I looked for myself and honestly did not have time to reach out to staff, but we could do a follow-up. If you've been to Scottsdale, I will tell you that I've seen these just from a real person perspective, and they do not look like your typical storage facility. You don't, except for urban areas, you don't typically see a lot of two-story or multiple-story facilities. And they certainly have pushed both the site design as well as the building design, I think, further than many suburban communities. And Scottsdale's a suburban community of the Phoenix metro area. So they're, they're larger than us, but I think they have done a good job. I was trying to find the legislative history, which I wasn't able to, but I'm going to make a broad-based assumption that probably they had similar concerns. If you've been to Scottsdale, it's a very design-oriented community. So I'm assuming that at some point they had a very similar conversation to the one we're having now.
Okay, so I think at this point, if I'm correct, what we need to do is narrow down what it is we want the recommendation to city council to be, if we can come up with a consensus among us and direct staff. Am I getting that right?
So
That's where we are now.
yeah, the revised work plan, we would, in order to meet the expectation of city council and also the moratorium expiration date of July 1, we would come back to you for a public hearing in May. Now, we could do that at the first meeting or the second meeting. We have flexibility. So if you want to have some more conversation, we could come back on May 8th for more conversation if you felt that that was needed. So we have a little bit of time, not a lot, but a little bit of time to continue the dialogue or do a little bit more homework if you felt that was needed.
I guess just to follow up, I'm following the trail of thought of putting design standards, site limitations, like adding the sandwich of all of the different conditions that we're creating to really hone in on where these would go. Would we need to make an inventory for ourselves to make sure that those conditions are available, or do we just add those conditions in there and hope for the best? Because here's what I'm thinking, right? We could add the multi-layered version of this, but if we're doing these, very strong design standards and site restrictions, we might be doing already to ourselves what I think we decided not to do the last time, which was putting a full-on limitation to the development of these types, right? Because we could basically create the conditions for those not to be available or able to be developed if we don't have those site conditions. So would that require resource? I guess
No, it's a great question.
Is there any legality behind that, making sure we're not chasing our tail?
It's a great question. So what we would do for the next step, depending on your direction, is if we knew, for example, that you said half a mile apart, as an example, we would take the existing and the 13 existing, the 7, that are in line, and we would map those, and then working with our GIS coordinator, we would then apply this standard because again, we know they are only allowed right now in heavy industrial and light industrial. So if you apply that half-mile standards, how many properties would we actually have left when we went through that? And then if we applied the 1,000-foot from a collector or greater, that would be another way to analyze that. So we could analyze that, but I want to go back to what you said. Is this approach in essence, a way that will ultimately limit or result in very few, if no, new facilities? Possibly. The market may look at this and say, this is too much. We don't want to do this. We want to go places that it's easy to get through. And that's great. That's up to the market. So yes, this may be a longer way to get to the potential prohibition that you discussed earlier and weren't ready to recommend. Having said that, and I don't know who said it earlier, but I think it was the chair actually, as this city's population grows, there may be a time when the community says, we do want more of these. Now again, we did not do a statistical survey. We did a qualitative survey. We heard back from 39 people. The majority of them said, we think we got enough for now. They may feel differently 3, 5, whatever number of years down the road. As the city's population grows, and at least the propensity I think that many of us have to need storage beyond our domiciles, that may grow as well. So if, just for sake of conversation, if the commission ultimately recommended the council we recommend prohibition. We recommend a revisiting of this within whatever time frame you identify, with some sort of analysis to determine and community engagement to determine if there is need for these facilities in terms of allowing them back either fully or under some limited scenario like we're discussing right now.
So one of the things I know the city's looking at is to maybe there's some land on the north side that at some point we have a sphere of influence, and that might open up more industrial. We are very limited. What is the number of acreage that we have?
We have 519 acres. Remember that a square mile is 640 acres. So we do not even have a full square mile that is dedicated to light industrial and heavy industrial land uses. Of that 519, I would say roughly 50% of that is consumed, and I would say roughly about 30% of that is consumed by these type of facilities. It's not new. We've shared these statistics with you. Currently, 83% of working adults in the city of Indio travel outside the city for employment. It would be wonderful to get that number down. It'd be wonderful for many reasons. It'd be wonderful for the climate, but it'd also be wonderful to see people buying their gas in Indio, buying their sandwiches, running to Home Depot to pick something up versus doing these in other communities. So that would be a wonderful benefit for the city. So yes, there is, the council did approve funding for a study that would ultimately potentially look to bring that land in, but you're talking many years down the road because of the infrastructure needs. So we do have a fairly precious commodity right now of land. We don't have a lot of it. And these facilities, and again, I'm not saying anything we haven't said already on the record, they tend to generate low employment. Many of them are fully automated or almost fully automated. There is limited to no sales tax valuation. Now, with the code language that you currently put in the code and the council accepted, where there is a certain percentage of frontage of properties that has to be in office or retail use, we may see sales tax come from that, but we don't know that for certain. And then the third arena for these facilities, they typically generate low property taxes. So these are facilities that provide a qualitative benefit to our residents. Obviously, if someone has a need, they can go to these facilities if there's capacity. But as it was pointed out at the last meeting, people from outside our city also use these facilities. So they may not be always available to Indio residents because others from Palm Desert, La Quinta, Coachella might be using them. So yes, we do have a very precious commodity. We have talked about previously, the vice chair, we talked about the jobs to housing policy conversation that we want to have separately. And to have those jobs, you got to have land. And it can't, and to have significant job opportunities, you can't have an acre here or 2 acres here or 3 acres there. You need significant land, particularly if you're wanting a business of any significant employment level to come to your community, because there are a variety of reasons why businesses come to communities, but land availability is a key one.
And Kevin, in your experience, a process of annexation, like the one, where we're put, what is that, like, how many years down the line could we ballpark, could we say maybe in so many years?
Yeah, the annexation process may be the easiest part. It could take a couple years when it's all said and done between the studies. You have to go through the local agency formation commission process. That might be the easiest part. The bigger question is, if ultimately this land came into our city, is how do you get infrastructure to it? How do you get water? How do you get sewer? How do you enhance the road system? The road systems serving this area are in essence country roads. They're not built at a level to accommodate truck traffic or more automobile traffic. So even if we were to get the annexation, I was actually sharing with a staff member recently, there are several communities in the Arizona area and also over at San Diego area that have been planning these employment corridors for 20 to 30 years and building out this infrastructure, because nobody literally has the capacity just to build it all at once. So they've been building it out, creating the environment, having that quote-unquote shovel-ready lands, and then offering that to the market. So we might be looking, I don't know, but we could be looking at a similar time frame. So the annexation might be the easiest, the heavy lifting might be everything else I just talked about.
Yeah, and even with creating like community benefit agreements or things to encourage development that then bridges the gap for developers to kind of weigh in, and that could still, even with all of these types of incentives, could still take 20 years. So
Could.
yeah, okay, yeah, thank you.
Yep.
And that's county land, right? That has not been invested in.
Great, so yeah, right now that
No
is unincorporated
infrastructure,
Riverside
right.
County. The vice
So the-
chair is correct.
So the county has not did any reinvestments when it comes to infrastructure. So it's just pretty much raw land.
For all intents and
And
purposes,
do,
yeah.
and probably do not have any plans to do any type of infrastructure investments, correct?
Not that I'm aware of, and I know that other areas have worked with their counties to have, if there was a shared goal of building out these employment corridors, they've worked on financing mechanisms in these other communities I've referenced. But I think right now this is primarily vacant. There are some resource removal-oriented businesses out there and some residences. So you're talking a big change over whatever period of time based on financing ability and extension of utilities. So what we know today is we have a very finite number of acres in our city. We have a goal in our general plan of creating more local employment opportunities. Again, while it's not the only reasons businesses come to communities, having available land is a good thing. Our economic development team shares regularly that our industrial vacancy rate hovers right around 1% right now. So we don't have a lot of vacancy, which is good, but it's in part also a problem because we don't have the growth because there's not land.
70% growth since 2000 is extreme, right? Like in comparison to how other cities are growing. So we do expect, and we've planned for this 2050, or 2040, I'm sorry, our general plan. So yeah, to me, it seems like we need to go back to really thinking about the best use for these land designations where we're creating the conditions to allow these types of developments to, pop up. And it seems like, thank you, Kevin, this is all really thorough and very informative. I think it helps me understand and paint a picture of all of the potential ways that we can still continue to create the conditions to allow for something like this. But it just sort of reinforces what I was thinking the last time we were here, that maybe this is time for us to start considering a prohibition, thinking about a timeline where we could reconsider this again. And maybe it isn't the 20 years when we get the annexation, maybe it's sooner than that, but certainly, I wanted to kind of put it on the table. I know that UE didn't have consensus the last time, and I think the purpose really for your thought process, I'm assuming, really is to get this information in front of us. We've gotten this information in front of us, and so I'd like to, and what that would look like without making a decision. Obviously, it's a study session, but I'd like to also get a chance to look at what that would look like for us.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Commissioner Ceja, because I'm looking at the numbers. We got 259.5 acres left, and I look at that and wanting to see how we can preserve that. But again, going back, not just housing but also just looking at, we look at employment zones, or we used to have an enterprise zone, but there was a certain number and condition when we get like manufacturing, like those were zoned, right, for light and heavy industrial. But also looking at, again, putting a number to those areas that we have left to preserve.
Right.
So, and again, I think I agree with Chair regarding the 4,559. I actually think it should be higher. Based on what we have, because the majority, again, of our storage facilities are all in the south part of Indio. We have one maybe on the new northern part of the freeway, but the majority is either in some in north, but the majority is in the southern part of our oversaturation, to be frank.
So I think the
But-
challenge for the commission, I think, first thing, you as a body, you're the advisory body to city council. If you were to advise that prohibition, for example, that is certainly your right. We would obviously go through the formal process to do that tonight. We're just discussing it. You could make a recommendation to have a review within a certain period of time. Typically, my experience, and I don't know what Jennifer's experience is, but typically I've seen anywhere from 3 to 4 years after that to allow the market to settle, allow some period of time, and then revisit it. You may end up at the same place in that 3 to 4 years, or you may have different factors going on in your community. We know just in 3 to 4 years, a lot has changed in our community. So it's not unreasonable. I think if you go longer than that, you start losing the value of introspection to see if there's something that has changed in the community. So a reasonable time limit would be prudent and from staff's perspective. If you go down the road of looking at a higher number, going back to the other point that the vice chair made, the challenge becomes is legally defensible, right? Because if someone wanted to challenge our policymaking, we have to have a legally defensible. My approach on this was one way. If we went to the 10,000 that the chair mentioned, we would have to make sure that our legal team felt that it was legally defensible and supportable, such that we wouldn't end up back here having a conversation because we didn't pick the right number.
And thinking about the job creation, because I think, we've brought this up, really the intended use for these light and heavy industrial, and just, to just bring this back up, we currently do not have a way of not limiting, but a way of requiring a number of job creation. So even if we did some more stringent design standards that maybe created the opportunities for commercial use like we've done now, we still wouldn't be able to say at minimum so many jobs, so that's what it needs to create. So the design standards need to be made so that they can create these conditions.
That is correct. And just to maybe extrapolate that further, some communities have created a jobs to housing ratio requirement. So for example, and some communities have gone as far to say 1 to 1. So if you have 30,000 rooftops, you should have 30,000 jobs. Some communities have said, well, that's just not going to happen, so let's be more reasonable. Let's have 0.25 jobs for every rooftop, so, or 0.5. So, but in the general plan policies currently of the city, we do not have that ratio. Now, that we talked about that the last meeting, we discussed that would be an opportunity to come back and have a separate policy discussion outside of this. But just to remind the commission that as it stands today, we have goals and policies for job creation, but we don't have a ratio that we are seeking to achieve. Economic development team, myself, others who have worked in the industry for a while, we've seen that in other communities. We've worked in communities that have had that. It can sometimes be very interesting because if you have a hard requirement, it can be a deterrent to some businesses. If you have an incentive-based requirement, it can be an attractor, but then you have to figure out what's that secret sauce of incentives where you're not giving away the proverbial farm, but at the same time, you're inviting enough folks into your community that it makes it worthwhile. That's a whole separate conversation. So for this evening, well, again, to re-echo what the chair said a few minutes ago, what we're really looking for, as much as you're able to, is what is the consensus of the commission? As I mentioned, we would have one more spin on the wheel, so to speak, to come back on May 8th and talk about this again if you wanted to, before we'd have to meet the timelines that were under schedule the public hearing. So again, if you want me to revisit any of the previous policy alternatives, I certainly can, or we can go further in depth on the ones that are in the memo tonight.
So can I ask a question? Since, we have land use limitations, we say you can use land for this, 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 and this. Can we give these types of facilities a maximum percentage of our industrial, whether it be heavy or light land use? So we can say this, I don't know, 10% or 15% or 20%, whether we are over that number now or not, does that
We certainly can. I mean, Jennifer Shagan, here's my concern. That comes back to how well we do our math. And it's always one of those things, if we didn't count well, we may, and so from the administrative side, it's a little bit more not impossible by any means, but it's a little bit more complicated because we have to do a really good job of maintaining that inventory, assessing it, and making sure that we don't, whether it's on a per site basis or a per zoning designation basis. So for example, no more than X percentage of light industrial zone properties can be dedicated toward this use. The devil's in the details. So that's my only caution, but certainly we can look at that approach too.
Okay, so let's see if we can agree on one thing. I think we all agree that based on the current land that we have in the city, based on the plans in the 2040, the things that we want to see in our city, that these types of facilities has probably hit a number that we feel like that's all our city can possibly support. Are we in kind of agreement with that?
But yes, but
But it's
because
how?
of it's because of our intention for the land use designation where they're
Correct.
going and
Right.
the types of jobs that we want to see generated in the
Correct.
development that goes in there.
And the fact that we need to protect this land in order to meet those goals that we have for 2040.
Yes.
Okay? Okay, so Kevin, as staff, and I think right now you're ringleader, we can do a combination of these, right? We don't have to do one. Or we can just do one and say this is all we want to do for now and maybe revisit in 3 years. If the moratorium is something that we really want to do with a 3 or 4 year revisit.
Just one clarification, just because we're on the record, it wouldn't be a moratorium, it'd be a prohibition.
Sorry, prohibition.
Yes.
I knew what I meant. Nobody else did, but I did.
knew.
Okay, so maybe I need to let each commissioner kind of say where are they on the whole moratorium, because that's like the simplest prohibition. I did it again. Prohibition versus these other options.
So it's entirely appropriate in a study session format to do what's called straw polling.
Straw
You're not making any decisions, you're simply just asking the perspective of each of the commissioners. You can do that on a per policy alternative basis. So, yeah, exactly. And so, for example, on the prohibition, you could ask each commissioner to state their opinion. And if there was any other topical areas that you or the commission want to discuss, you could do the same thing.
Okay. All right, so why don't we, so if each commissioner will say how they feel in this straw poll regarding doing this prohibition and looking at it in 3 years. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I'll go first because I was the one that was saying this last time around, but I feel much better today actually about it. Last time I thought I was looking at the numbers that we were being given and looking at what we heard even from those that are in the industry. I liked the idea of these standards once we all had, you all decided we wanted to explore these other options. In a much better, more informed place about a prohibition because of the limited land that we have designated for this specific land use, and because in relation to where we are with other cities, and you mentioned, Chair, we've gotten a huge influx of these very recently. Yep. And so I think it would be adequate for us as a city to take a pause and revisit where our residents' needs are in a few years. I'm not opposed to 3, 4, 5 years. And I, actually, I would even suggest that we look at a timeline that could be reasonable enough for our interest of going down creating job conditions. So whatever we think we might need as a city to go down that path from study to developing recommendations to implementation and letting this roll, I think once we have that infrastructure to say we're going to allow development that is doing what we intend to do with that land use designation, I think I would feel very comfortable saying, let's give ourselves that space. So yes, on prohibition.
Quick question, if we were to enact a prohibition, that would allow how many that are currently 7?
Right, so when the moratorium went into effect, there were 7 in progress, various stages, that were allowed to proceed outside of the moratorium. So those 7 would be allowed to complete. We would end up with a total of 20. And if there was a prohibition, then no additional new facilities would be allowed in the city.
Yeah, I think if currently it seems as if it's not a crisis for the city with the 13 that are existing, if we add 7 more during this prohibition period, I think we're still going to be more than adequately, providing what's needed for the city. I think Commissioner Ceja recommended like 3, 4, or 5. I think on the latter end of 4 or 5 might give us a little bit more time to see how things develop, what out of those 7, if they all end up, existing at that point or not. And that'll give us a better idea, a pause on further, say, okay, we started this, we had 13, now we have 18, and kind of reevaluate from there.
Thank you. Obviously, and thank you so much again, Kevin and the staff, for providing us with more information to make, I think, a more intelligent, decision for us to consider. But when you look at all these metrics, right, when we look at the footprint of what these self-storage areas, take up in terms of, the available acreage, and looking at our projected growth model, I'm of the mindset that we need to create opportunities for jobs and housing and not storing things, is my opinion. Obviously, we've seen, a tremendous growth in this industry with regard to the 7 that are obviously in the hopper. And mind you, using some other metrics from other cities, I mean, we, in a lot of ways, already have met that particular metric from other cities. However subjective that number can be. So in order for us to definitely continue to generate some new revenues, obviously looking at this available acreage as an opportunity to create, more jobs, and more importantly, to using your phrase, to provide future opportunities for folks to come in and provide this jobs to housing initiative that we want to explore. I think it's in our best interest to probably revisit this in about 3 years, looking at our existing self-storage needs. And mind you, the only 39 people that, responded to the survey also did indicate that we have plenty. So I think it's in our best interest to consider the prohibition at this time with regard to us considering, looking at this maybe in 3 to 4 years, has been recommended.
I agree. I think, again, the 259.5 acres has been sticking with me for the last few weeks. And again, about preserving that for jobs. And when I look at other cities, they're almost about to be built out. And looking at the adjacent side of the freeway, whether it be for, again, they're looking at industrial, they're looking at manufacturing, and other uses, as it looking at, again, to annexing some of the county on the northern part of the freeway. For us, it's not really guaranteed, so I don't want to count on that. And again, I'm just zoning in on this 259.5 acres, and again, really want to look at preserving that. And so I am actually for a prohibition, and again, I want to go take it higher, maybe 7 years. I think 7 years would be sufficient.
Okay, I'm in agreement. I think 5, 6 years works. What I would like to ask is that in that time frame, right, the staff keep this kind of in the forefront, knowing that we're going to revisit this in a few years. And like you said, you really like the way Scottsdale's done it. So I think it's maybe taking that model and tweaking it to fit Indio. So when we to us in 5, 6, 7 years, we have something pretty solid to work on and to see if this is what's going to work for our city, right? So we don't start from scratch all over again in a few years. So I'm normally not for prohibitions, but I think with the speed of how many more we have gotten in the last, couple of years, and the limit on the amount of land that we have left, I think that this is necessary. So I think I agree with everyone. The biggest thing would be to decide how many years, 5? You know, we're kind of floating between 5 and 7, I think, is what we've talked about. So do we want to split it at 6? Do we want to stick at 5? Does our,
Could we leave that to council? I mean, this is a recommendation, right, where we could recommend the prohibition and ultimately, or do we need to add a time frame for them to consider as well?
You can defer to the council, but you are their advisory body. They look to you to kind of make the actual recommendation. I think from staff's perspective, in policy making, probably 5 years would be a good compromise number, because again, a lot can happen in 5 years. And if at that 5 years, you as well, you or future commissions and future councils could say, no, we're good. We're going to wait another 5 years. So it's just looking at it. It's not making any changes necessarily. It's just literally coming back in a forum like this and having another conversation.
okay, I think that's something we could all be in agreement on. I think that the 5 years, and that would be our recommendation to council at this time.
So just a couple of housekeeping items just to make sure. So I'm just going to restate for the record, the preferred policy alternative to be scheduled for public hearing is going to be a recommendation to City Council for prohibition on mini storage, self-storage facilities, and recreational vehicle storage facilities. That would come with a recommendation that this be reviewed in 5 years for any potential policy changes, if there are any. Do you feel comfortable in staff scheduling for the May 8th public hearing? Do you want it to be later? We made the stakeholders aware that these meetings were happening. We don't have anybody in attendance. We could, if you wanted to, schedule the public hearing, notify them. They can attend. They will be aware of the recommendation. You're to obviously advise your recommendation only. You could decide that you want to have the industry come and talk to you about this proposed recommendation that you're going to hold a public hearing on before you hold the public hearing. So kind of seeking some direction from you in terms of when we go to public hearing and what, if anything, you want to happen in between now and then.
I mean, I think we've discussed this quite a bit, so I really don't think we need to delay it anymore. I think we're all pretty much in agreement that this is what we would like to see presented to City Council as our recommendation. So the only thing I'm doing is checking my calendar. Hang on.
So that the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission is May 8th. And we would need a quorum, so we would need a minimum of 3 in attendance that evening. So if you're able to confirm that you'll be available, knowing what you know today, then we could go forward on that date.
All right, I'm good. I was a little worried, but I'm good. Everybody good?
I may have to be excused to travel.
As long as we have a quorum, that'd be fine. It'd be best to have it for May 8th. That way, if we don't have a quorum, we can push it to the 22nd.
Correct.
And still stay in our timeline.
That would be correct. So if for some reason someone gets ill or something, we fall below the quorum standard, then we do have another date, as Commissioner Isiano noted. So if the commission's direction is to go ahead and schedule for May 8th, that is what we will do.
That works. Yes, thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Are there any other questions around this topic that you want to discuss, or are we good to go?
I think we're good to go.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we will move on to item 8, Commissioners' comments. Anybody have comments? No?
I do. I just want to say congratulations to Public Safety, everyone that worked so hard in these last 2 weekends. I live right at the epicenter of where everything is happening, and I didn't even know it was happening, or I wouldn't have known. I think and I said this last year, I feel like we've just gotten it so well with these festivals and how, very well managed and how they impact our residents. The other day I flew into Palm Springs, and the gentleman that gave me the lift, called the lift, lives in that same neighborhood too, and we were talking about it. And his impression was that as well. He's saying, I've lived here, for 20-something years since it started, and it's just gotten so much better. And I think it's a very successful thing as a city for our departments that are leading the charge in making sure that everyone is safe and that we're not as impacted as we have been previously. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that's been working really hard. And we still got one more weekend to go, but I think I can make all my plans. Yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, I'll just say kudos to whoever developed that traffic plan. It was way much better compared to the last 2 years.
I just want to take the time to say, because the other day I was actually driving by the fire station, and then I think the city did put out the photograph that I shared again. Just kudos to, once again, the staff, the team, everyone involved with regard to just a great looking facility. Today we were actually appreciating a few of the captains from local fire departments, just, thanking them for all their help in doing what they do. And more importantly, just want to say, once again, thank you to you all. It is Administrative Professionals Day, for what it's worth. So all those administrative professionals that are out there, this is your day, and we want to thank you for all you do. You're the backbone of just about every organization that's out there. So just wanted to shout that out as well. Thank you.
I actually want to do a shout out to all the new restaurants that are downtown. If you have not gone down there, please do so. There is so much going on. And I think I'm really excited about a lot of things in our city, but I think that's pretty cool to see after many, many, many years or decades of work. And people need to understand tonight. But now it's here. And I want to thank staff for the work on this project. I know this has been kind of a lingering topic, and it takes a lot of work, but we do appreciate you guys. So thank you.
And I just wanted, you talked about that. I attended the ribbon cutting, got there a few seconds late, but to the center stage. And again, it just really warms my heart because I remember going to Al's Shoe Store, which is now Gambino's, and going to McIntosh Drugs to get a milkshake and candy. And my grandma used to go, we used to always go shopping. And so I was with my grandmother, and now I get to do that with my grandson. So it's just really cool to see that all happening in downtown. And, this time we didn't shelve it. We actually put a plan together and got it through. So really proud of everyone, staff, and getting it, this is a huge outcome for us. I'm really proud of that.
And Kevin, also, I did notice some of the apartments broke ground on Oasis. I was super excited to see that. So that was another big one. Yeah, you need to drive that way. And okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 9, staff items.
Well, you guys stole a little bit of my thunder already. First of all, Commissioner Fajardo highlighted that it's Administrative Professionals Day. I want to say thank you to Paulina. Paulina volunteered for this. I'm not sure that she knew what she was getting into, but she's been very gracious, very helpful. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. She's amazing, and we're really lucky to have you helping us out with the Planning Commission. I also wanted to, the Vice Chair talked about Center Stage, which is our new downtown permanent stage facility. It's not only going to be for performances, but it will be programmed quite regularly. My understanding is that eventually there will be movies shown there. We will have a screen for movies and other events. So the idea, and I want to, for those that were around, I think the majority of you were, I want to remind you that this was an idea that was came out of the downtown specific plan that you all worked on. It took some effort, and they got a little bit of construction left. They're building the bathrooms, but it's there and it's available, and it's an asset for the community, and it's also an opportunity for the businesses that surround that to take advantage of the people that are attending those events. So the businesses that you mentioned and more to come. Yes, we do have construction underway in downtown. It's called the apartment name is Blue Sapphire. So this is one of 2 projects that this commission reviewed and approved in 2023. This project is the first one out of the ground, so it is the one that is closest to Highway 111. They have gone vertical. They have put up their steel and their concrete, so they are moving forward. So that is very exciting to see. We're also working with the developer of the Skyline Apartments, who have been working to finalize financing, and we hope that that project will break ground in the near future. So that's also very exciting. And so downtown, and obviously what's happening with the College of the Desert as they work towards completion of their new 65,000 square foot facility. So we're seeing a lot of energy and activity in downtown. Would be remiss if I didn't mention Food Truck Fridays, which is growing in attendance and popularity. Our second Saturday events are still very popular, and also Saturday, the farmers market on Saturday. All this is occurring downtown for Indio residents, visitors, and guests of the city. So really exciting to see, and for many of you that are long-term, if not, been here your whole life, this is a big change in many ways. Even my 5+ years here, it's a big change from when I joined the city. So it's really exciting to see. I wanted to note that we have, as I mentioned last time, we have a new staff member that has joined us. His name is David Razzo. He is our senior management analyst. He will be working on community development block grant and housing issues. He's taken over many of the duties of Jesus Gomez, if you knew Jesus. He retired at the end of 2023, so we were really lucky to find David. We quote-unquote stole him from another city in the valley, and we're really lucky to have him. This is his first week on the job, and he's doing great, already jumping in. So, and then we have finalized the date for the start of our new assistant planner, who will join Nico in the trenches, so to speak. So Nico's excited, as are we. And he'll be joining us on May 20th. So we're very excited. He is currently working out of the area, but he grew up in the valley, so he is returning to the valley. So that's really a great opportunity to have someone come back. And then just wanted to, you may or may not have seen, but the city is in the process of updating its consolidated plan. This is a required document. As a recipient of Community Development Block Grant funds, we are in what's called an entitlement city. We get funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development annually to be used in certain areas of our city that are, it's based on census tract data, that are deemed low to moderate income. And this can be used for public improvement, can also be used for public services and economic development. So every 5 years, we have to prepare what's called a consolidated plan, and that kind of sets the goals and visions of how we're going to use that money. And then every year, council has to approve what's called an annual action plan. So we are going to have a community open house tomorrow night at the Indio Senior Center. This is April 25th at the Indio Senior Center from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. We're encouraging residents to come, whether or not you live in one of these designated census tracts. It doesn't matter. We want to hear from our residents. Last Wednesday, we were at the Indio Swap Meet. We have a community survey that's available. If individuals are interested, they can go to the city website and link to the survey there. We sent a mailing out to all residents in those census tract area. We sent information through Peach Jar, which is the Desert Sands Unified School District communication tool. We've also our communications and marketing team has been blanketing the proverbial social media airways with information. So really encourage folks, if they're listening, to attend this meeting, and encourage the Planning Commission to let your people in your community know this is a great opportunity to give us feedback. Ways we've used this money in the past, we've used it to either enhance or install curb ramps and that are compliant with the American Disabilities Act. We've replaced 1,000 street lights in the city with LED so they're brighter and they're more energy efficient. We have prepared several, repaired several roads, particularly in older residential areas of our city that were in challenged condition. We've supported nonprofit organizations in our city, Coachella Valley Rescue Mission, Fine Food Bank, Martha's Village, Meals on Wheels program. So these funds are used to benefit the citizens of our community, and how we as staff and how council directs us to expend the money that we receive from the federal government is through the consolidated plan. So really encourage folks to come out tomorrow evening. We're going to be having folks that have English and Spanish speaking ability. And all of our information has been put out in English and Spanish to make sure that all of our residents of the community are able to participate. So would ask the Planning Commission, if you can, to let your network know.
And Kevin, the survey has an incentive for participation, and I want to say whoever worked on that survey, well done. I just told my team to look at that survey because it is. I just think it's well done. I looked through the questions, and it just seems so accessible to the wider community. And so I just want to say congratulations to the team that put that together. So yeah, truly.
I would love to claim credit, but we have a really very good consultant team that has been working with us, and so all the credit goes to them. They've actually worked on a number of projects in the city. They know our city well. They know how to communicate to our residents. They've honed that over a number of surveys and public engagements. So thank you. I will pass. Hopefully we will, folks will, it's available till May 10th, so there's plenty of time to respond to it. Commission members, if you're interested, you can respond to it. Just go to the city website, and there's a link on the city website. So please, fill it out yourselves if you're so inclined. Thank you.
Perfect. All right.
I did have one more thing,
Oh.
because I was surprised the vice chair didn't ask me, but I did communicate to our economic development team to communicate to the Greater Coachella Valley Chamber of Commerce to get your email addresses and your names added to the invitation list for grand openings, and that was done. I got confirmation.
Well, yeah, I understand there's been some changes there, so thank you for doing that.
I didn't know about the changes. I wanted to let you know it's been done.
All right, if there are no other items, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting to our next Planning Commission meeting dated May 8th, 2024 at 6 p.m. Thank you, everybody.